Welcome back to my channel. I'm Amber, and this is my channel, Cuprious Callings. Today I'm going to talk about my plans for rereading 6 of my favorites. In this list, there's one that I haven't read since probably middle school. The others I have read within the last few years. I'm excited to reread these favorites because I read them all before I was annotating my books. Now, I was afraid to annotate because part of me thought you shouldn't deface your books, but I've learned that annotating my books makes me love them even more. Just to have some memorable quotes highlighted, write down my thoughts and feelings, and just get more out of the story. I want to try to reread all of these favorites in 2022. First on the list is a book that I've read twice already. It is The Order of the Odd Fish by James Kennedy. This is a pretty ratty copy. There's tape on the back. I love this book. I think I bought it at a book fair in high school. It's just such a wacky story. It follows a 13-year-old girl as she figures out why she was dropped on the doorstep of her caregiver, Lily. This book reminds me of something that should be turned into a Tim Burton film. But the 2 times that I've read it, I've loved it. It's always going to be one of my favorites. Next up, I want to reread Anne of Green Gables by Lucy Maud Montgomery. This edition my husband bought me for my birthday a couple years ago. It's called a Word Cloud Classic. So it has some quotes on the front. I've read both Anne of Green Gables and Anne of Avonlea, but I want to reread it again because I'm planning on reading the whole series. The Anne of Green Gables series and the movies just really means a lot to me. It always hits so close to home, like just Anne being a redhead and being weird, and it reminds me of being at my grandparents' house because I remember watching a movie of Anne of Green Gables there. I know it's going to be very special to me. And a lot of the movies just kind of focus on her in her younger years, and I would like to see who she becomes as an adult. Third on this list is Sheila Levine. Sheila Levine is Dead and Living in New York by Gail Parent. I picked it up mostly for its cover. I'm obsessed with like the 70s and 80s. This was written in the early 70s, so I just picked it up on a whim and I thoroughly loved it. The main character, Sheila, in the first couple pages, she decides that she wants to commit suicide, and she's stating that this is her suicide note and that her body will be found slumped over it. But she's almost 30, or is 30, and she's still single, and she's from a Jewish family, and her family in particular is kind of focused on marriage, and then she can have her own life after she's married. But she comes to a lot of realizations in this book, and I would just love to go through it a second time and see if I enjoy it just as much as I did. Next up is Eggshells by Katrina Lally. This book takes place in Ireland, and it's about a girl named Vivian. She's not a girl, she's an adult. But she is dealing with some mental health issues. She has a caseworker, and she doesn't have any friends. She has an older sister that she doesn't seem to get along with, and all of her neighbors think she's crazy. But with her having no friends, she decides that she does want a friend, and specifically a friend named Penelope. So she advertises for a friend named Penelope in the newspaper. She's so quirky that her parents, when they were alive, described her as a child that was left there by the fairies, and she is looking for a portal to get back to the land that she believes she came from. She has a cat named Lemonfish, and she's just hilarious. I've read a few other books. One that comes to mind that reminds me of this one is Eleanor, Oliphant is Completely Fine. I think that's the title. These two books seem very similar. And even We Have Always Lived in the Castle, Mary Catherine reminds me of Vivian out of this book. I want to read this again just to enjoy the comedy and talk about it here on BookTube. Alright, second to last, I have Dealing with Dragons by Patricia Reed. This book I picked up, I think it was free from the library. I read this in late middle school. I've been trying to get into more series, and this is, I think, a young adult series, and this is book 1 of the Enchanted Forest Chronicles. I remember really enjoying this the first time I read it, and if I read it in middle school and kept it this long, I think it meant a lot to me when I first read it. So I want to see if it still holds up and if it's still one of my favorites. Last on this list is this chonker, The 13.5 Lives of Captain Bluebear. I bought this at that discount bookstore because it was so big and I loved the cover. And just the formatting is interesting. It's kind of like a textbook almost, as to where it has like little headings where it kind of switches topics. And it just goes through, like the title says, the 13.5 lives of this Captain Bluebear. But at the beginning it says, a blue bear has 27 lives, and that he is going to recount 13.5 of them because he should still have his secrets about his other 13.5 lives. But it took me a while to read this. It's just a very sprawling, epic fantasy, and it's set on the continent of Zamonia. And this author, Walter Moors, he is German, and he has a few novels set in that same fictional world, Zamonia. But this just covers a lot of ground. Bluebear is he goes on a lot of adventures, and he meets a lot of strange creatures, but the world building is wonderful, and a lot of the characters he comes to interact with are really well fleshed out and quite enjoyable to read about his interactions. And he overcomes a lot of obstacles, he gets himself into a lot of trouble, and I just want to see if my feelings about this book are the same if I attempt to reread it. And I want to challenge myself to read longer books, and I might as well read a longer book that I've already read because I know that there's something worth it at the end. But those are the 6 books that I want to reread this year, and I'm going to annotate the heck out of them. I don't think I'll do a wrap-up video on all 6 of them at the same time. 2 of them are going to be part of a series, so I'll probably do a wrap-up video once I finish the series. But if you've read any of these books, let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video. I enjoyed reminiscing about my favorites, and I'll talk to you again soon.